Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Swanberg, and I am excited to talk to you today about selecting a fertility clinic in Canada, the US, abroad, really anywhere. And am hopeful that on this webinar, you will learn from our nearly 20 years of experience working with clinics on how to differentiate between a clinic that is surrogate friendly, may not have so much surrogacy experience, one that is a primary establishment and allows for you to bring a donor to the clinic rather than purchasing eggs from the US, and what all of it means. So today I will be diving into all of those questions. If you have questions, please pop them into the chat on the right-hand side of your screen, and I will be happy to answer them for you. We're just going to allow people to join. We'll just wait another moment or so. And I will shift myself around as the sun has just hidden behind the trees. Okay, it looks like more of you have joined. So welcome. As I said, my name is Leah Swanberg, and over the last nearly 20 years, I have learned so much about surrogacy, egg donation, fertility clinics for today's talk, and am hopeful that I can share some insight and advice to those of you who are looking at selecting a clinic. What I want to start with is choosing a fertility clinic is unlike anything else. When I want to eat at a restaurant or shop at a store, I'll often look online for Google reviews or Yelp, or I'll ask friends or family if they've ever eaten there or purchased anything there. And usually I can collect some good data. For surrogacy and egg donation, because it is such a unique experience, that friends and family piece may not be as applicable. And if it is, lean into it. It is so important that if you know someone who went to a clinic and had a great experience, gather the name of that clinic, that doctor, and tuck it away as part of your research. When I talk about reviews online about fertility clinics, what we have found is that negative reviews often equate to negative results. And so, what that means is when we've searched online at clinics and looked at comments and what people have said, often it's because they haven't gotten pregnant. And there are so many factors to getting pregnant that a negative review for us doesn't necessarily make sense because someone's had a negative experience at a clinic. And then, second to that, we find that when we talk to intended parents throughout the process and say, hey, how has your experience been at the clinic? And it's almost like um, the superstition gets in the way of giving an opinion. So they'll say, "Oh, it's great," and we'll encourage them to provide feedback to the clinic or let the clinic know that they've achieved a pregnancy and they're very happy. And we often hear back, "Well, I'm just going to wait till my baby comes and then I'll give feedback." And as those of you who are watching who have children know, that the baby arrives and life is upside down and busyness happens. And so we find that we don't see as many positive reviews as we know are out there. And we really equate that to the busyness factor of having a baby. Now, that's not to say that we don't want to research online. Absolutely. When we're looking online, where are we looking? Are we looking in places that can be verified, or are we looking at opinions on social media? And I really want to encourage you to look um, at trusted sources. And so I always say, fertility clinics often will participate in research studies. And so if you Google research studies, surrogacy, Canada, you will see doctors and clinicians who are involved in so many cases that they are invited to be part of research. And I think that's a great place to start because it is fact-based, it's evidence-based, it has to be backed up. And the reason that matters in Canada so much is that, unlike in the US currently, given the government there now is looking at the CDC differently, but until now, the CDC has collected all data from fertility clinics and listed the success rates of fertility clinics, both using donor gametes, so eggs or sperm, and surrogacy. In Canada, that doesn't exist. The Canadian Fertility Andrology Society, so CFAS, um, has some data collected through the Born report, it's called. However, it's not capturing every cycle started. There really isn't a whole lot of information there, but it is there. But again, looking at research, looking at data around clinics. Um, Also, when you're looking online, really looking at your community. And when I say your community, every client that comes to CFC, generally is part of a community, and that is people who are from outside of Canada accessing services, people within a specific province in Canada accessing services, um, people who are from the LGBTQ community, people who are cancer patients. So there are lots of different buckets of people that come to the fertility space. And so finding a clinic that specializes in or understands. So an oncology patient may ask their oncologist, "Hey, do you know a fertility clinic that you would recommend?" That recommendation um, can be amazing. And I say that if you're in a major metropolitan center, absolutely, oncologists there will likely work with and partner with, um, fertility doctors in that community. If you're in a smaller community, often that oncologist is sending you to another oncologist or keeping you in community, but not having that um, that access to a fertility clinic because there isn't one in that small community. So as you're looking, joining groups around family building for cancer patients and leaning into the advice there. And many people come to us and they say, I talked to my family doctor and they suggested, such and such a clinic, and I just want to know your opinion. And I always sort of send people back to the family doctor and say, "Hey, okay, so, family doctor, great. Um, how many patients has your family doctor sent there, and how many achieved a pregnancy through surrogacy and egg donation?" And that's important information because if they are sending you to a clinic, a fertility clinic that's up the road or that, did a lunch and learn with their office staff once, it may not be enough data. There may not be enough information there. Um, However, again, tuck that information away because all of these sources may end up telling you the same thing. And then at that point, which clinic to attend. Um, when you are looking at going to a fertility clinic, and you will want to begin to sort of get your questions together. And so the questions that we suggest asking, and these questions typically are asked once you are receiving a referral to that clinic. So once you're in the door, once you're speaking to the fertility doctor, these are the questions that I would ask. And with that being said, I think it's really important to interview more than one clinic, unless that first clinic really nails it for you. And so the questions that I suggested, if you're in a province that has provincial funding available for IVF, asking this clinic, are you part of that? And what are my chances of getting a funded cycle? Um, Asking, as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, asking the doctor if he or she is part of any research around surrogacy or egg donation, and where you can look at that research. I think that's very important. Is this clinic a primary establishment? Are they able to take your egg donor through a process of collection of eggs, creation of embryos for you, and transferred into a surrogate? Not every clinic has that ability. And if they don't, they may end up referring you outside of Canada, and that may not be your best option. When you are talking to the doctor, asking about their experience, how much surrogacy and egg donation do you do here? Do you have numbers on how many cases you do each year, and what that looks like in terms of my demographic? So as I talked about earlier, if that is being a cancer patient, being LGBTQ community, bringing embryos from outside of Canada would be another sort of bucket or community that you may want to look at or ask your doctor about. And then what is their approach to third party or surrogacy and egg donation? Um, who is the patient? Who is the payer? Um, what that looks like in terms of how they will support your surrogate and your egg donor, um, and how they will support you as intended parents supporting the egg donor and the surrogate. Um, does your clinic offer um, programs for those of you who may need a different type of care? And a different type of care may be care for our clients who are HIV positive or Hep B positive. You are able to, um, move forward with surrogacy and egg donation. So finding a clinic that has the capabilities to support you. Um, will they support you if you have a social reason for surrogacy? So if it isn't a medical or a traditional physical medical condition that brings you. For some of our clients, it is mental health reasons that they are pursuing surrogacy. For some of our clients, it is being a single male, and they will be working with an egg donor and a surrogate. Is your clinic equipped to care for you based on your situation? It is so important that from the beginning you share whatever that situation is. As I mentioned, will they accept embryos from outside of the country that you're working in? So if you're working with a clinic in Canada, will they accept your embryos from the US? If you are working with a clinic in the US, will they accept your embryos from Australia or vice versa with any of those pieces? It is so important that you have all of the information to make the most informed decision as you move forward. We have found that in nearly 20 years of doing this, each client has a unique story, unique needs, um, is looking for a clinic to work with that understands their needs. And we have found that, particularly Canadians, are approaching this as they would going to their family doctor. And I really want to encourage those of you watching this webinar that while Canadians and Canada is a social health care system, this system is not a part of that. And being a researcher, a consumer, ensuring that whomever you are working with, from your fertility doctor to the lawyer that you work with, to your surrogate, egg donor, agency, ensuring that they all understand what your needs are and are able to join you in your experience. And when you select your egg donor and surrogate, that you are joining them in their journey, and that the fertility clinic you are working with has made a commitment to care for them. When we look at clinics and the way they care for surrogates and egg donors, um, what's stood out for us time and time again is, are they keeping the egg donor and the surrogate safe? Are they explaining, outlining, going through the risks of medication, the risks associated with IVF, whether as a donor or a surrogate? Are they ensuring that the donor or the surrogate understands those risks, the complicating factors? Is this clinic ensuring that your surrogate and donor not only have the well, it's not required anymore, but a counseling assessment to look at whether or not surrogacy or donation is a good choice for them. That the invitation to sort of look at that for them, but that the clinic offers ongoing support to your surrogate and to your egg donor. And the reason that that is so important to us is very simple. We know as a society the effects of alcohol on a pregnancy. We know the effects of nicotine and recreational drugs on pregnancy, which is why surrogates are screened appropriately to ensure that that isn't an issue for them. And what we also know um, and are learning, in these last few years specifically, is that children who are born of people who suffered with depression and anxiety and those types of issues during pregnancy don't fare as well. And so we know that supporting intended parents to support their surrogate by selecting a fertility clinic that will offer counseling throughout the journey to ensure that the surrogate is cared for and well so that your baby has the best chance of being born healthy and to do well. And so that for us is so important. And we would encourage you, if you are if you are going to be working with a surrogate, to partner with a clinic that really shares that value around supporting the surrogate, not just in the beginning when it's exciting, but throughout the process, knowing that your baby is the most important person in this process. And so ensuring that your surrogate is well throughout the process, and your donor as well. I mean, throughout that egg donation process, um, clinics have a choice to show up for donors, and we are just amazed at the beautiful ways that clinics can do so. Just going to leave a note for any questions. I have talked a lot. Um, and okay, I'm just pulling questions off of Instagram. Okay, this is a great question. It's from someone who's looking at surrogacy in Canada and looking at surrogacy in another destination in which the fertility clinic cares for the surrogate throughout the entire pregnancy, and asking if that is something that happens in Canada because they are comparing fertility clinics in this case in Colombia to those in Canada. And in Canada, it's very unique in that our country is huge and the majority of surrogates live outside of the communities in which the fertility clinics are in. And so surrogates, and our surrogates live in their homes throughout the whole through the pregnancy and are with their families and all of those pieces. And so what happens is once your clinic gets your surrogate pregnant, they will coordinate all of the first trimester screening tests, blood work, ultrasounds, medication, transporting medication to the surrogate that she'll need to maintain the pregnancy. All of that will be done by your fertility clinic in her community so that she is with her family and with her children, and all of that is still going on, and she will be cared for by a midwife, obstetrician or general practitioner throughout her pregnancy. And while the fertility clinics in Canada and in the US release the patients or um, you know transfer the care to a local care provider at 12 weeks, um, most intended parents tend to stay in touch with the clinic and their nurse and ask advice and questions. And we hope that your fertility clinic is as excited about your pregnancy as you are. And again, that's something to look for. Like, are you going to be available to us? And what does that look like? Another question that came in through Instagram, which we think is great, is um, our clinic, they're looking at a couple of clinics. Our clinic does not do the genetic testing of our embryos in the clinic. They send the embryos away. If we are looking at a clinic that does that or has the ability um, to do the genetic testing in house, what do you recommend? I think it's really important that you talk to both of those clinics about that. Genetic testing of embryos is relatively new. The last, say, 5 years, we've seen a huge uptick, and and each clinic approaches that very differently. And so that is absolutely an amazing question to ask your clinic. Do you do genetic testing on the embryos? And I would even back that up to say, what kind of genetic testing do you do on the gamete donors, so on the egg donor or the sperm provider, to ensure that there's limited risk on genetic issues that could occur in the baby? I have one other question. Okay. The next question was around the surrogate and selecting a clinic. They're deciding between two clinics. One is more strict in terms of their criteria of a surrogate, and they want to know if that equates to success rate. And honestly, we have seen so many shifts around um, clinics and their criteria, including but not limited to surrogates without children, and their acceptance at some fertility clinics. We've also seen these guaranteed programs pop up, and we will guarantee you have a baby, or we will give you your money back. So there are so many shifts around this piece, um, that and success rates and clinics becoming a little bit more competitive in Canada because there are more of them. And so we're really, really seeing all of this. And I have Cindy Wasser, who's going to be joining us in a few minutes. She's a lawyer. She um, has really worked with many clients around success guarantees and what that looks like from a legal perspective, as well as some other sort of pitfalls that she'll discuss around, what are you going to do with your embryos when you've completed your family? Have you signed the right paperwork? All of that, while it happens after the process of having your children, those decisions need to be made ahead of time. And so I'm going to bring Cindy on to talk about um, what is important legally when selecting a clinic, what is important when you're reviewing your fertility clinic's consent forms, what questions should you ask in that initial doctor interview around um, the legal piece. And so Cindy will be coming on. There we are. Hello, Cindy. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me
Good
today. Hello,
for
everyone.
you.
All right. So I've been listening to most of it. My laptop did a reboot, so I missed the first few minutes. But
We
I
still
think
can't hear you.
oh, I think you have to unmute me somewhere.
No.
Yeah. How's this?
Yeah, it shows your mic is on.
How is this? How is this?
No.
How is this? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Now here we are.
I think when my laptop just did the reboot, it changed speakers.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much for having me, Leah. I was listening to most of it. I came in a few minutes late during the reboot. And I think you've made some really interesting and valid points for people to consider.
And I want to ask you a question first, because something that I'm just reminded of as I see you is, for those of you who are watching, you may have a surrogate come to you through an agency or independently and say, I'd love to be your surrogate, and this is the fertility clinic I'm interested in working with. And Cindy, I know that happened to you with Deborah, and you switched clinics, I think, if I recall correctly.
Deborah was my surrogate, for those who don't know what Leah's speaking.
Okay. Yeah.
And yes, our surrogate had just completed a very successful journey at a certain clinic and said that's where she wanted to be. And so I told the current clinic, I had the doctor's blessings, because of course his culture, his value system was to care for me to have a successful pregnancy. And so, yes, he happily helped transfer the embryos.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought of that when we came on, because it was a point I had, that there are some times that an egg donor, it may be listed on her profile that she has a preference of clinic or a surrogate. And, it's the professional's job to really support you with that. So
absolutely. And so some of the legal considerations that you should look at also in choosing the surrogate deal with the documents that the clinic has. So in Canada, and Leah referred to whether a clinic is a primary establishment, Health Canada has set out some guidelines for clinics for safety purposes. The health and safety of gametes, sperm and eggs, embryos, must achieve a certain standard to be legal. So the clinics have to apply for this sort of accreditation, and a primary establishment is one that can actually go and do virtually everything in this fertility world, make embryos and transfer to a surrogate. And not all clinics, as Leah said, will have that. So it's very important that you start that way. A lot of people think because they're hoping women will get pregnant themselves, they just need a little bit of fertility treatment. So they're starting in a clinic that doesn't have the full achievement. And then when they find out that they have to go the distance now with a donor and maybe a surrogate, they have to switch clinics, which is heartbreaking. And although we don't want to believe for a moment that we're going to go down that route eventually, I always say plan for A, B, and C and start so you don't lose money and time. But when you do sign up with the clinic, you're going to be given a number of documents. Most of them should send them by PDF, but if they were printed, they'd be this thick, and the PDF is going to take you 2 days away from your very busy lives. And most of you are working in careers that are very demanding for you, and that's why you can afford this. So you don't have a full day or two to read through all this documentation, and you just want to click and sign. And I get that, because that's exactly what I did. So it's important that you have someone go through it with you, and even, less time if I go through it with you. If you have another lawyer, you should ask them if that's part of their service. It certainly is part of what I do at Hope Springs. Even though we're not negotiating anything, I think it's really important that you know what's happening, what you're consenting to, what your donor may consent to, and what your surrogate will be consenting to, because they too are getting those documents. And if you're a donor, if you're a surrogate listening to this, you really need legal advice to go through it, because I guarantee it's complicated. I didn't understand half of it as an intended parent. So the things that you're looking at are, what are you doing with the eggs, the sperm, the leftover material that's what you think is garbage. It's their treasure, by the way, and your embryos and your excess embryos, because you may have embryos left over when you've completed your family. And so some clinics have research facilities, as Leah mentioned, and they may ask you to sign a document saying you'll give them all that junk. So your trash is their treasure for research. Some will have an embryo donation program or refer you to one for, if that's something you actually want to do with your excess embryos, is donate them to a family that would need both an egg and sperm donor. They can have an embryo. But apart from that, it's the understanding of this in Canada is property, albeit very special property. Should you as a couple split up or should one of you die, what are you doing with those things that are sitting there year after year? And it's important that you have some legal advice at the beginning about that and think about it and have a discussion. You may not feel you need to hire a family lawyer. We can tell you some of the ups and downs and things to think about. Nobody's saying go then make an agreement, a prenup or a separation agreement and say, what are we doing with our embryos? But you better be aware of it. And you want to think about it in your wills. And you also want to think about if you separate and you have different partners, are you going to let that person make a baby with their half of the embryos? Let's say you're two men or something, because that's a stepchild, it's a semi-child, it's your child, it's matched with the child you currently have. So there's the consent documents of information, there's the legal consents about what to do with the embryos, and then there's the storage part. A lot of people are paying for storage every year the embryos are stored. Some clinics say if you agree to the research, we won't bill you for the storage. So does that allow you to donate later if years later you say, you know what, nah, we're really ready to donate, because maybe today you don't feel you would ever do that, later you might. I see that all the time with clients. So you want to know about the research. I've just learned recently that a lot of clinics have sold their research contracts to a bigger company. So suddenly everyone's getting billed from this company, including me, because I've left over embryos at my clinic. So what does that mean for you? What contract did you sign? Did it allow that to happen? Is there going to be an increase in fees? Do they know about the research deal you made that you shouldn't be charged? All of that. So, and then finally, I want to talk about these guarantee programs that Leah mentioned. I can't hear you. You're muted.
Before we get to that piece, I do have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
When intended parents are looking at selecting a clinic,
Mm-hmm.
and we got this question earlier, and their clinic says, we are not a primary establishment, we purchase eggs from the US. How would one, you know, how do you decide between this clinic that's been helping you for so long, or that you really are interested in going to, but balancing that with, I want to know my egg donor, that's not possible there. Are there exceptions to this primary establishment rule, or is this just, this is it?
There is no exception to that primary establishment rule. One thing,
Okay.
so whenever I have to make any big decision in life, I go back to what my values are. What was my big goal? And if my big goal in this case is to have a healthy baby, then everything I do when I start this journey should be getting me there, including having to deal with emotional breakups that I might have with my clinic because they cannot get me there the best way another clinic can. And all the things you were talking about to choose that. Well, I would say if it were me, because of my personality, I'm on this journey to get here. I want to have all the best people and all the best tools to get me there, starting from day one. So why I hope an insemination will get me pregnant as a woman. In the event that it doesn't after a year, what am I going to do? What if I find out that I need an egg donor? What if I find out that I also can't carry? That was my journey, people. 9, inseminations, try a donor, used all the embryos, still couldn't get pregnant. I went through 3 clinics. So, take my wisdom, my guidance. It won't cost you that much money, or 2 years, like 4 years actually, that it cost me, and say, what if? and say to your clinic, but why aren't you a primary establishment? What's holding you back? It's a win-win. And if they say, well, because we don't have the experience and we don't do enough to get there, is that who you want?
Okay.
Do you want to just coast and hope everything's going well so you can go for the person with no experience and no knowledge and no think out of the box theories? But then when something happens and you don't, are you going to say that it won't happen to me and do what Cindy Wasser always says is don't be a teenager and say it won't happen to me. So I like to pick the best clinic, the best agency, the best lawyer. I want a team, even if I think IUI is going to get me there right away or an insemination immediately as a woman. I just got an email from a client. He forwarded an email from the clinic where they've become close to their egg donor, and the egg donor is now offered to be a traditional surrogate. And so they want to do an insemination to her. And so they asked the clinic near where she lives to make it all convenient, just like you raised before. And they actually wrote him, I read it, I saw
I read
it.
it.
It's illegal to be a traditional surrogate. Now I have to get involved and educate them and say, where'd you make that up from? In what world? Because it's not. So then I said to him, if they feel that way, regardless of me correcting them, is that where you now want to be when they don't even know what they're talking about? Let's get you to a clinic that knows what it's doing. Because if I do this, it means I'm also doing that. Like that's a guarantee of their commitment to the process. They just want to do this. And that's okay for some people. But on your journey, you need to be open to let's see what works. We're throwing spaghetti at the wall and let's see how much of this works for you. So you want to ask your clinic, your agency, your lawyer, how much spaghetti do you throw at the wall before you give up on me? It should be.
Well, and on that, I think it's, another important question, as Cindy mentioned, and we share this client, and I've read this email as well, which is very strange. At what point is it a legal question? We have clients that come to us who, have, significant mental health issues that, going off medication to become pregnant isn't safe. And, you know, does a clinic have a requirement to treat everyone walking in? And, in my experience, I've seen these clinics who, require, women to go through 2, 3 miscarriages before they will allow them to work with a surrogate or a donor. And I'm wondering legally, like where are we in terms of asking for what we need, and requiring it of the clinic?
We have full reproductive rights in this country. But we don't, it's very hard for the government to take the position that clinic, which is a privately run organization, is committing some sort of human rights violation or Charter of Rights violation in Canada. But if a doctor ever said to me, when I was trying pregnancies with our embryos, you are going to need 2 to 3 miscarriages, Cindy, before we let you take the next round, I would have reported them to Health Canada as not in my mental health best interest. I don't know what doctor thinks that is a value of the Hippocratic Oath of do no harm. I think that's very harmful, but that's my personal opinion. So I'd like to go to that doctor if I knew it was happening and say, what standard are you following? Are you forced to do this by your medical association or regulator, or is this just you?
Right.
If you're forced to, then let's go to your medical regulators and say, what is this?
Right.
What archaic world are you people coming from? I find that shocking. With mental health, we dealt with a situation where we were told that maybe it was a human rights violation discriminating against somebody being able to be a donor with severe mental health issues nobody's going to want those embryos, I'm pretty sure of it, or those eggs. So do we just go through the motions? And that needs, that's something that needs to be researched because it's tragic as well. But They can have their own baby, I suppose, but what's the point in a business of spending money and investing to make eggs in the hopes that someone's going to want to use this donor, when most people, when they hear what the trajectory of illnesses are going to say, why are you even telling me about this? Or do you have to, as an agency in a clinic, to say, here's our data, we've asked 7,500 people, they've all said no.
Yeah.
So now what do you want us to do?
Right.
Is
Absolutely.
this, if that's the human rights legislation, we need to go to the Bureau and say, seriously?
Yeah.
Like, let's fix the law. So I want to get to the
Yes.
guarantee.
And with these examples that Cindy's giving, it's really important because each one of your stories is an example and a guidebook for future people. So having partners, whether it's lawyers, physicians, who are going to say, wow, I've never heard of this, let me look into it, are the people you want on your team. So next we're going to talk about this whole new world of guaranteed programs, guaranteed to have a baby, guaranteed to have embryos, guaranteed to have, your donor looks great on paper, so there should be 50 embryos and there's 5, and how to approach that. Because let me tell you, these clinics, and majority of them have them, had lawyers help them put it together, and I believe that intended parents should have lawyers helping them unpack what it's all about.
Yeah, navigating it is interesting. So I have always said these guaranteed programs are like casinos. There's only one winner in the end, and it's not us. So they would never offer it if they didn't think they were going to make money. If they thought that they might even break even, it's not worth investing in a new program. If they thought they were going to lose and that they might lose, they wouldn't do it. So they know they're winning. So let's look at why they're winning, which means you're losing. So most of them start with saying, there's a list of approved donors. So that right away narrows your choice of donors when you're working with your agencies. And how do you know your agency has an approved list of donors? What if there's a new donor? She hasn't been approved yet. You can't use her. What if you fall in love with a donor that is only on the list to make an ad hoc try, or we call a la carte? Keep going, but not a guarantee. What if she's on the list for one baby only and you want 2? What if you're same-sex couple and you want 2 babies, one of each, and you have to split the eggs and make 2 piles of embryos? She doesn't do that, but this donor is everything you want. You're not allowed to have that donor. You have to use the approved donor for your program. So you have to choose the program before you choose a donor, or you're looking at aggravation and heartbreak. And the agency is going to be frustrated too, but they're going to support you, and so am I. So then you do that. Then you have to have so you're going to have your embryos. So now you want to make sure you have a surrogate that's going to get pregnant. And the clinic absolutely wants success on that first try. But the problem is, as much as the science is there, it's not a perfect science. There's an awful lot of luck and planning and thinking and experience that goes into it. So you have to have a clinic that has a lot of experience again. But even those clinics, you have to know what is the success rate of the first transfer, even in your guaranteed program. So what happens when it doesn't work the first time? The clinic is probably going to say, let's do a second transfer. That's included. But you know what's not included is getting your surrogate there. Those expenses, depending on where she lives, add up. Airfare in Canada is outrageously expensive. And certain times of the year where your clinic may be in a city like Toronto will have very expensive hotels. How much was a hotel when Taylor Swift was here last November, Leah? $1,000 a night? Mm-hmm. I offered the agencies to have surrogates stay in my house. I was going to rent my house out for $6,000 a night and sleep in my cart. So you have to know the summer is high season here. So then there's that cost, her food, her loss of income. Is she bringing a companion because she's nervous? She's never traveled to a big city. She's from a small town. So there's all of those costs that go into it. So now we go to the third transfer. Again, all those expenses add up. And so now everyone's frustrated, and there's 3 months of frustration and hope and dreams broken, and it's a roller coaster. And you know what? For the IPs, it's not just you. She's also feeling it. And she's wondering, is this good for my mental health now? I keep doing this. It's so stressful. I'm on these meds. It doesn't work. And if I was on anxiety meds and I changed them for you, my anxiety meds that I'm on now that are safe aren't as good as the ones I was on before. I really want to go back to those. I barely know you. It's not for me that I'm doing it. All of these things start happening. And then, failed third transfer or miscarriage or something. And the clinic says, we don't want to do another transfer. We've used now 3, 4 embryos. We think it's time. We don't want to say it's us. We don't want to say it's the embryos. We're not even sure. So it's not that we don't want to. We don't think we can. Let's try a new surrogate. Now you go back to your agency and they put you on their rematch. Well, you've just spent a year. You've given your agency, most agencies are about $20,000. They've done a lot of work. Now, that's true. They haven't completed the full amount of work, so they shouldn't charge another $20,000, but some might. And they're going to charge you something to continue again to find a new match, because there's a lot of work involved in the intake and advertising, etc. Now you have a new surrogate, if you're lucky, within the next year. Because a lot of surrogates, I think, say, why didn't they get pregnant? I don't want to work with them. And no one has a true answer. Now, guess what? If you do find a surrogate and she passes screening again, and you've sent her there again for screening, which is a cost that's not included in the guarantee, you need a new contract, because that contract was for the last surrogate. So now you have legal costs. And she needs to talk to the lawyer too. So you have her lawyer's legal costs as well. So this guarantee program that you thought was all in has
And then
now
you have screening for your new surrogate, and life insurance, and
life insurance. Yeah, all of those things. So now your guarantee for 50,000 or 60, whatever it was, has suddenly increased to another 30,000, 90,000. And then do you go through 3 transfers sending this surrogate there again before, the doctor says, okay, you still have to use all of your embryos. So surrogate gets miscarriage, surrogate doesn't have successful transfer, embryo after embryo after embryo. You're stuck in this program, beating this, thing to an end. You're spending good money on bad. The surrogate's frustrated again and may walk or may hang out with you because she's a phenomenal angel superstar, but it's still costing you all these extras. Now you've had to use all these embryos, and you have to start again with new embryos. And some of them even say you have to use not just the top right embryos, but the embryos that aren't the top right, that we don't know if they will even survive or they may miscarriage, the mosaics. So does the guarantee say you have to use the mosaics? Would you use a mosaic embryo if you weren't in a guarantee? I guarantee not. How many transfers would you go with your surrogate if you weren't in a guarantee program? I guarantee not 3 miscarriages and 3 transfers. I guarantee you wouldn't do those things. I guarantee it wouldn't have cost 90,000. It would have ended up being less. And so there are all of these things. And then you have to ask at one point, when you're completely broke and you've now crawled under every carpet to get money, and I mean, really, there's no way. There's no how. You've even done a GoFundMe, let's say, and you need to stop tragically. Where do you get the refunds? In my office, if you say we can't continue, we haven't completed a service like a contract, you get a refund of the money I held in trust for the retainer minus whatever time I spent with you. So you have to ask the clinic as well, with this guarantee, we couldn't do another round of embryos, or we can't do any more, we have no more money to keep transferring. We can't find a second surrogate. The agency hasn't found us a surrogate. They can't, so we're done. we need a refund. And why does the clinic say no refund? Why don't they back up their guarantee with a guarantee of a baby? And if the bulk of the money we know is making an embryo, because that is very expensive medically, but they haven't gotten you a pregnancy, should they not be giving back something for the service they didn't do? If I don't do a contract and I charged you $6,000 for the contract, I'm going to give you back the bulk of it. I'm only going to charge you for the time I spent. The clinic knows what it's done. It needs to break down those costs to make a business plan. So I'm constantly being asked by clients, why is there no refund here? And, then I have to go back to the clinic and say, do the right thing. They couldn't get pregnant. Does your clinic stick to that? Or is the value system of the clinic one of compassion and caring and saying, as long as I don't lose money, I'm not going to keep money I didn't earn? Of course they should keep money they earned. They don't owe you a free run in life, but they should give back what they haven't used. There's got to be something there. So I'm not a big fan anymore, especially because clinic agencies are telling me we can't rematch. We can't find them another match. And the pressure goes back on them because the clinic is feeling the pressure. And all I see around me is everyone feeling pressure. To me, that says this doesn't work. What more do we need to do? Why are we flogging it?
What we've seen, and a couple of things. It is a casino, and I love when they win, because if they win out the gate on that first transfer, you're pregnant, and great. So you've paid twice, you've paid 2.5 times for something, and you got that thing fast. Because for some people, everyone values time differently than money, and for some people, time is more important than money, and vice versa. What we have seen in the US particularly is this shift away from guarantees to pay one price for the IVF and up to 3 transfers. And they've done that because they recognize that after 3 transfers, they want to sort of let people off the hook, so to say, and that, we know the best embryo is used first. So I think talking to clinics about surrogacy and about egg donation and about, what, what the difference is, and for those of you on this listening now or listening to the recording, create a spreadsheet and look at the differences in costs and look at how, what that's going to look like for you from a financial perspective. Because, we always want to look at the what ifs, like, what if this doesn't work? Okay, so what are we doing? We're going to find you a new surrogate. What if that doesn't work? And it might not. So finding a clinic that, shares that value with you. And then, once you get that pricing, being able to go to your employer and look at your health benefits. Do you have a health spending account? Are fertility medications covered under your plan? Because the clinic will give the receipt in your name. Are family building, is that part of your plan? And if, when you're tucked away with a good lawyer and your, health plan says, well, no, because you're not carrying the baby. I can tell you this, I know Cindy's writing a letter telling them where to go and how to get there, because this is your child and this is for your benefit. But for the fact that you're born without a uterus, the baby's growing somewhere else, but it's your baby.
I will storm that castle.
Yeah. So,
and I just want to add about that prescription thing. A lot of people feel scared about that. It's perfectly okay. Right? It is supposed to be your medication. She's taking it as a surrogate. The word surrogate means instead of you.
Instead of, as a replacement. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so while, this webinar is about talking about clinics and, making decisions around the clinics, I think that protecting yourself as you go into this journey, whether it's with an agency and having a lawyer that can say, yeah, like, this is what the agency does. This is what the clinic does. This is what, all of the, this newborn insurance, this is what they do, making sure that legally you're protected, because you need to be available to your child when they're born. So you need to make sure that you can get your child home, that you can, engage with the fertility clinic appropriately, that all of those pieces are covered as you're doing your research, and that the consent forms you're signing do identify the fact that you do or do not want to donate your embryos, and that aligns with the egg donor and what she said she was up for around those embryos because she participated in the creation of them. And there are all of these pieces to think about. And so we really want to encourage you, as you are connecting with a fertility clinic, to just sort of keep these things in the back of your mind. um, there's no one perfect clinic, and everyone going through this process really navigates it in a very different way. And so we encourage you to do research and talk to professionals, myself, Cindy, and get some great advice. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Cindy, for joining. And yeah, we will talk to you all soon.
Can I just say, like at Hope Springs, we offer a strategy session if you're not ready to commit to the full retainer for a contract. That's a lot of money to have in my trust account while you're waiting. There's a strategy session that you can book for a small amount, and then later it would come off the retainer. But at least during that session, we can get into detail and look at the documents and stuff. So, avail yourselves of that. Big decisions should be made with the head, the heart, and the soul.
Absolutely. You take yourself with you wherever you go, and that includes fertility clinics. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And if you're receiving this video and watching it later on, please reach out to myself or Cindy. Our email addresses and information are in the email in which you clicked this video. So talk to you soon. Thank you.